Exercise. Exercise relates a lot to nutrition. Two things that I'm pretty passionate about. I grew up in the state of Washington. It's a whole other state. It's 2 states above us, if you include Oregon, and then Washington being number 2. It is there. When I was younger, I used to think every once in a while that maybe Washington was really the extent of the world, and all the rest of the world that they said was there wasn't there. Well, I can tell you it is there, because I've driven through it now, and it does exist. So Washington really is up there. I'm from the side of Washington that gets 4 seasons. It's kind of like Colorado or maybe Minnesota. So lots of mountains, lots of hiking, lots of skiing in the wintertime, but also fairly hot summers in the summertime. Lots of lakes, lots of water skiing, lots of wakeboarding. From the city of Spokane, where Gonzaga University is located, where I did not go to school, but my longtime girlfriend and soon-to-be, hopefully, fiancée, Mrs. Johnson's daughter, Mrs. Johnson, the college counselor. Raise your hand if you remember her from last year. Her daughter is my girlfriend, and she went to school at Gonzaga. She played volleyball. When I went to school at Washington State University, home of the Cougars and famous people like, in Pullman, famous people like, Mark Rippon. I don't think you guys even know who that is. Clay Thompson, there's a good one. Played sports, and I went there thinking I was going to be a veterinarian. Went through about half a year of school and decided, no, going to school for 8 years is really not fun, so I decided to change my career. I found this major in exercise nutrition where I got to go, instead of being in Pullman, which is a cow town and a college town, the size of the population of the city completely quadruples when school's in session, and when school's out of session it's only like 10,000 people. And I got to spend the last 3 years of my school up in Spokane, where I was, which was home for me, and so my parents were there, save some money on rent, I could spend a little more time around some old friends, and that worked out pretty well for me. I also got to go to a newer campus where the buildings were nice, and I got to be in smaller classes, class sizes I should say, and I got to know my professors a lot better than I would have if I were to have stayed in Pullman. When I was in high school, I played 4 sports: football, basketball, baseball, and track. When I did track, I threw. We had javelin in Washington. We also had disc and shot, which you guys have down here. I know you don't have javelin down here, though. And so I had a lot of experience with power sports. I was the type of athlete in high school where it was important to be big and have strong muscles and be as fast as possible with the things that you did. When I got done with high school, or when I was getting near the end of high school, I had a couple of schools that really wanted me to come play football for them. I have an older brother, he's 5 years older than me, and he got every athletic gene in our family, I swear, and I got the leftovers. He's 6'4". He could have easily played Division I football, but he decided to go to a smaller school because academics mattered a little bit more to him, so he played football in college himself. But I noticed, because again he was 5 years older than me, I noticed that as he was finishing, I really didn't want to have the same lifestyle as him. His body was starting to break down, he was starting to get a little heavier, put a lot more weight on his joints. I didn't think that was going to be a wise decision for me, in my smaller frame, for the longevity of my life. So I wanted to make some changes with the exercise that I was doing. So instead of going and playing football, I decided to say no to the opportunities, and went into college thinking I was just going to maintain fitness by lifting weights on a regular basis. The truth is, lifting weights is not enough for exercise. In fact, it kind of gets boring. And it really came to a head when I went to the weight room one day. I think it was a Saturday morning. I had some homework to do later that day, I remember. And I was thinking about doing that homework when all of a sudden this old guy walked by, and it was like seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was an old guy, but you could tell he was a bodybuilder. And I thought to myself, that is not the way that I want to spend the rest of my life. I don't want to be 50 or 60 or even 70 years old and be humongous. That's just not appealing to me. Now, I think it is appealing, especially if you can maintain that fitness for a long period of time. One of the people we're going to talk about did. But I decided then and there that I wanted to get back to what I used to do when I was a kid. When I was in kindergarten and 1st grade, my dad, who was a marathon runner in college himself, used to get my brother and I up at 6:30 in the morning. We'd go down to our basement, we would work out, do some push-ups and some jumping jacks, and lift a few weights. And then at 7 o'clock we would go outside. I lived a block away from my elementary school, and we would run down to the school. We would run around the school and the park that was connected to it, and then we would run home. We'd do a couple laps. And we did this in the lead up to a 7.5-mile road race that was our local kind of summer or early spring event, you could say. So even from a very young age, I was doing exercise of some sort, and in this case I was doing long distance running. And I started running again when I was in college. I found out I really loved it. Since then I've done a ton of marathons. Well, I wouldn't say a ton. I've done a lot of marathons. I had some great success with them. I think I've won my age group in a number of them. I even won a marathon up in Death Valley a couple of years ago when I was visiting Mrs. Johnson for the first time. I had a lot of fun doing that. So all of that to be said, I come from a background where I have a lot of knowledge in both styles of exercise, or rather athletic realms. Power and resistance training, and endurance and gosh, we could say efficiency training. I tell you that because it's better for you to learn from more of an expert in a field than it is, say, to learn from Mrs. H, someone who's not necessarily an expert on it. And that's why she asked me to come in. Nowadays, I spend time in 2 different programs here at Oaks. I spend the majority of my time in the tutoring program, helping those awesomely smart football players who decide it's not important to do homework, getting their grades up and turning in their homework and talking to the teachers. Right? I also spend time after school. With several different sports teams. Most of you are in some sort of athletic sports team that I've worked with before. The majority of my time then with that is football. I also do basketball and baseball, volleyball and softball. Basketball and baseball, volleyball, softball for boys and girls in each of those sports except for football. So a lot of my time, a lot of my passion is in athletics and nutrition. Unfortunately, I don't get to do that as much because I do the tutoring a lot more during the day. But we're going to talk about the background of exercise. Our hope is that when you get done with this unit, you understand why certain people do certain types of exercise. And more importantly, why you should do whatever type of exercise you want to do to become the type of athlete or have the type of physique that you most desire. Make sense? Okay, let's become detectives. On your sheet there, the one with the 4 pictures on it, top left-hand corner. Describe what you see. Be a good detective. Think about it before you say anything. Excuse me, top right-hand corner. Top right-hand corner. Describe what you see. Think about it before you make an answer, and please raise your hand. Go ahead.
I got one of those sheets.
Okay, go ahead. Who's got an answer? Top right-hand corner. What do you see? What kind of guy? Come on.
Discus statues.
Kind of a discus guy. So what time period are we talking about? Greek times. Okay, we're talking about a Greek guy. Okay. What else you seen? Old guy, young guy? It is difficult. It is difficult. He is old. He's also standing on something. Can anyone make out what he's standing on? Any guesses?
A tree.
It's a bull. Actually, is what it is. It's a bull. Okay. This guy's name is, shockingly here, Milo of Croton. He has nothing to do with the word crouton, so don't get too confused. Milo of Croton. Milo, as the legend goes, was the best Greek wrestler of his time. To be a good wrestler, you have to have very, very strong upper body, right? Especially back in Greco-Roman wrestling. And some of you guys remember the guy Rulon Gardner. He was on Biggest Loser just a couple of years ago, and then also he won a gold medal back in the Olympics in 1996. Greco-Roman wrestling is a certain type of wrestling that you can only use your upper body. You can't use your legs to wrap around guys. So you have to use your upper body to pull the guy down and hold him down and pin him. Greco-Roman wrestling, which Milo was, as I said, the best at his time at, you certainly had to have a very strong upper body. Now, it's not important that you know he was a good wrestler. What's important is to understand what he did when he was younger. When Milo was born, so too was born on his farm, his family farm, because he was came from a very typical Greek family. So was born a calf, a young bull. And his parents gifted Milo that bull, and it was his job to take care of it. Now, of course, just as if you were a young child and you had a puppy when you were young, you'd grow up with that puppy and you're connected to it, and if that puppy passed away, you would have your heart broken, right? Well, every day you would have your heart broken because you spent every day with that dog. Wherever you went, the dog went, if possible, right? And you would love it, and you would hold it, and you would snuggle with it at nighttime. Well, the same thing happened for Milo and this bull. He'd go out into the farm or into the barn, and he would love it, and he would hold it, and he would hug it every day. Well, Milo got older. The bull got older. The bull got bigger. What happened to Milo? Milo got bigger because every day he would walk out, he would pick up the bull, he would carry it around for a while, and then he would set it down. This is a principle that we use and apply in exercise that has commonly been traced back to the grandfather of exercise, Milo of Croton, the principle of progressive overload. That if you're trying to gain or grow your muscle size, that you use progressively higher amounts of resistance or weights so that your muscles become stronger and stronger and are able to produce a greater amount of force. Makes sense? Pretty plain and simple, right? Okay. So, most importantly about Milo Proton is the principle of progressive overload, and he always carried around his calf or his bull. Okay. Next guy on there, down left hand side, a little bit fuzzy on the picture. What do you see? Say it again. A guy carrying a torch.
No, this is the runner.
Which runner?
The guy who ran the first marathon.
For the marathon.
That's right, the guy who ran the first marathon. Don't know his name.
No.
This guy's name is.
Oh, because he ran for the. It was like
He
he
ran
ran
to
to 26 and
tell
some
the-
miles and then he got
Yeah. This guy's name is Phidippides.
Because he was running to tell of the battle. Yeah.
I think there's two P's. I'm sorry. I probably have that spelling wrong, but I apologize. It matters very little to have the spelling correct. Phidippides, we have pieces of the legend getting put together. Back in Roman time or Greek times, there's a little city on the edge of a sea. That name of the sea is pretty famous. It was the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? And the city on the edge of the sea was called Marathon. Marathon was a stepping stone, you might say, to the capital city of Athens. And you see, the only way to get to Athens was actually to really kind of conquer Marathon, especially if you were coming by sea, because Marathon was surrounded by mountains. And these mountains kind of led the passageway all the way up to Athens. So you had to conquer Marathon in order to get to Athens. Likewise, Athens relied on Marathon to be a very strong kind of fortress, right? So if you were a neighboring or warring nation and you came, you had to go through Marathon. And if you conquered Marathon, you had a straight shot at Athens. Make sense? So what happened is the Persian army, in all their awesomeness, decided, hey, you know what, we're really a little bit tired and fed up of all the awesomeness that we have. We need to go take someone else's riches. So they sailed their humongous, massive army to Marathon, decided to start attacking. Now, at that time, they really didn't have cell phones, of course, so what they did is they started sending out messengers to tell the local cities, hey, we need your help to defend the Persian army. Of course, they knew that most of the people lived in Athens, so if they could get Athens to come help them, everything would be gravy, right? Except Athens was smart, and they said, well, Marathon, you're kind of small, not a lot of guys there. If you fall, we need all the people we can get, so we're going to keep ourselves protected. You just let us know how it goes down there. If you win, the Persian army is defeated, we don't have to go anywhere, we don't have to leave, we'll be happy. If you guys lose, then we'll stay here, we'll defend Athens to the best of our ability, and we'll call it good that way. No reason for us to jump ship and come out and help you, because we might then make ourselves vulnerable. So, Phidippides and a couple other guys were messengers, and rather than jumping on horses, they ran between cities, because that was far more effective for whatever reason, I don't know. And so it's very likely that at the time of the battle, which probably took a couple of days, Phidippides had been running on a very regular basis to many other local cities, maybe in upwards of about 300 miles by the time the battle has been decided. And they tell Phidippides, hey, we need you to do one more thing for us. We need you to run from Marathon back to Athens, even though you've run 300 miles. We're cool with that, we know, but you're our messenger, so we need you to go. You do at nighttime tell Athens that we don't need their help, we've won the battle, and they can rest easily, because our 300 are a very small army. It wasn't 300, it's not the same story, it's a different story. Our small group of soldiers defeated the Persian army, and you're cool. So he runs at nighttime carrying a torch, all the way back to Athens, a distance of roughly 24 miles actually. Okay, 24 miles. Just shy of the modern marathon, which is what? 26.2 miles. 26.2 miles. Okay. Runs into the Senate room where the Senate is meeting. They're about to make the vote of, hey, we're going to stay here and we're actually going to fight the Persian army because we think they're coming, or hey, we're going to leave because we really don't want to get our butts kicked that bad. He runs in with his last dying breath, He gasps out one last word, actually, and then dies right there on the Senate floor. What did he say?
Victory.
He said victory, but he said it in Greek, because he was a Greek man. And what is the Greek word for victory?
Nike.
Nike, that's right. So Phidippides says the very now famous word, Nike, and dies. And of course we all know now, Nike, which you all wear on almost everyone's shoes and socks.
And shirts.
And shirts, excuse me, is the winged goddess of victory. Remember there's lots of gods back in Greek times like Zeus and Apollo and Ares. And all those guys respected everything that had anything to do with a god, and so they worshipped this winged goddess of victory. And nowadays you can remember that story because of the swoosh, which represents the wings that Nike used to have, or they believed she had. Cool? So, Milo of Croton, Phidippides, two opposite type of athletes, same culture. Milo is what type of an athlete? A power athlete or a resistance type athlete. Phidippides would be very opposite, a type of endurance athlete. Let's move on. Take a look, next picture. Who do you see? Do you recognize the guy at all?
Bodybuilder.
He's a bodybuilder, he's not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
He's old, isn't he?
Is this the guy with the internet when you were watching? That started the
It has something to do with
TVs?
everybody else. What?
He like started like TV
Okay, good.
workouts.
Know the answer. He started television fitness, TV fitness.
Hasselhoff.
Your parents would all know who this guy is without a shadow of a doubt. It's not David Hasselhoff.
He said that.
This guy's name is Jack LaLanne. Now, I know it's great for us to know guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but we know him well for things like movies. He was a very good bodybuilder before he did movies. Some of us might know him for steroids too. Okay, but Jack is actually a very natural bodybuilder. Big proponent of nutrition for the benefits of health instead of using things like supplements. He is well known for one particular product as of late that you might see late night on television. Anyone know what it is?
Blenders.
The juicer. Jack LaLanne and the Power Juicer. He was a big fan of taking vegetables and all the different sorts of fruits and all different sorts of actually foods in general, adding them to a blender, which he actually uses as a juicer, breaking them down for the liquids and the nutrients that you could reap from the liquids, and then drinking it as opposed to eating it, because that way it would be absorbed better by your muscles and your digestive system, and would therefore give you all the benefits, all the health benefits that you were seeking. More importantly, he was initially well known for his television fitness development. Jack went into Burbank, in California, not too far away from here, up to NBC Studios. I think, I might have been CBS, I can't remember who it was out of those two. Said, hey guys, I've got this fantastic idea back in the 1950s, or maybe it was the 1960s. And she was here and then she left. I totally go on for it. Okay. And said, hey guys, I want you to take a camera, film me, I'm going to work out, get fit and healthy, I'm going to tell people how to do it, they're going to do it at home, it's going to make you tons of money. What did the studio say to him?
No.
You're full of it. There's no way we're going to pay you money to work out just so that you can look good and people are going to watch you at home. They're not going to do it. So he said, thanks for your time. Gets in his car later that week, drives up to ABC Studios in San Francisco. Gives them the same pitch, and what do they say to him? They say, it's a good idea. We don't love it, but we're willing to take a risk on it. Here's the way it's going to work though, Jack. You're going to pay us money to use our equipment, use our laborers, and then we'll see if we decide to keep you past a week. So he starts doing it. A week later, they say, we're going to keep you on for the rest of the month. At the end of that month, they say, we're going to start paying you, because we're making tons of money off of it. 6 months after that, I think it's about 30% of America is watching this guy on TV at home, mostly females, who are at home, have no idea what they're doing as far as exercise, and decide that they really don't want to just sit in front of a TV for the rest of their lives. They want to be active, and they want to start looking slimmer, trimmer, and thinner, so that their counterparts, males and females for some of them, will be more attracted to them. In addition, Jack knew that he was going to help build the health of the American public. Now, of course, that wasn't one of the major proponents of what he was doing. He was kind of more doing it for the aesthetic appeal of it. And you used one piece of equipment to do it all because it was so easy to do exercise at home. What did he use?
Chair.
He used a chair. Pulls out a chair in front of these people. He says, I guarantee you, you can do everything you need to know with exercise with this little piece of equipment. People laugh at him at first, but he starts doing his exercise routine. He shows them how important it is to step up and start doing exercises for your legs that get your heart rate at a higher elevated level for a long period of time. He starts doing things like body weight exercises where he pushes himself up from the chair, off of the chair, dips to strengthen his arms and his chest. He says you can still do important things too, like push-ups where you can strengthen opposite sides of your body, your chest and your arms. Okay. He starts showing him how important it is to do squats down to the chair rather than like this, but all the way down to the chair and back up, and how important it is to increase the range of motion. People fall in love with this guy, and eventually it becomes a multi-billion-dollar industry, which now most of you guys know as just basically P90X, because that's the only one that really has a lot of acclaim anymore these days.
Insanity.
Huh?
Insanity.
Insanity. Okay? Jack LaLanne, inventor of or developer of television fitness. Last guy on there. What do you see? An Olympian of some sort? Skier, cross-country skier. In exercise, when testing to see how good of an athlete a power athlete is, we would test them by doing what? Weights. We would see what their maximum amount of weight is, right? We would test their maximum because that gives us a goal or somewhere to reach past, correct? You could lift 100 pounds this month. Next month we test you again. Now we can lift 200 pounds, right? An endurance athlete, how do we test their ability to be a great athlete? How far? So if they've run 100 miles, then the best, right? Well, what if you have multiple people that can run, 1,000 miles at a time? Time. What if you can run a certain distance in a certain amount of time? A little bit more ideal, right? But what if you have a mile runner and what if you have a marathon runner? Aren't they both somewhat of an endurance athlete?
Maybe per minute.
Per minute, perhaps, right? Per minute. Maybe the speed or the revolutions per minute. But a marathon runner would certainly run slower per minute than a mile runner, right? Does that mean the marathon runner is weaker? One of the ways we actually test your body's ability to be a great endurance athlete is a thing called the VO2 max. Anyone ever seen the Gatorade commercials where you see the guy running on a treadmill with those apparatus, the mask connected and the tubes coming out of it? What that's doing is it's measuring the gas that goes in and out of your mouth, because that's the main way you respire when you're exercising. So if we pump 6 liters of oxygen into your body and 1 liter comes out, we know that your body did what? It used 5 liters, right? Well, I have to educate you to understand that your body, when it is contracting muscles or doing a long-term amount of exercise like running and your heart rate gets elevated, it starts using oxygen. We're going to talk about that a little bit later and talk about the energy systems that your body uses, like other than just sugar. So your body uses oxygen. But if your body is better at using oxygen than it is at using other energy systems, you're generally a better endurance athlete. This guy, Bjorn Dali, set the world record for the VO2 max. Gosh, that doesn't make a lot of sense, Dan. He's a cross-country skier, and he set the world record for being the best endurance athlete. I thought the best endurance athlete would be a marathon runner, or maybe a bicyclist like Lance Armstrong. How is it quite possible a cross-country skier is the best endurance athlete in the world? Any guesses?
Because he's up in the mountains.
Trains.
Say it again?
He's in the mountains.
Because he's training in the mountains. Well, lots of guys train in the mountains. Even
Oh,
alright.
so it's staying up there.
There's less oxygen up in the mountains, but lots of guys train, marathon runners train up in the mountains. How come this guy's better?
Because his body is accustomed to it now.
What if I told you that the greatest majority, the sport with the highest number of high VO2 max tests ever tested is cross-country skiing? What's so unique about cross-country skiing?
Use your whole entire body.
Yeah, but don't you use your whole body when you're doing marathon running too?
But yeah, but it's in the core.
Ah, you don't use your arms as much. That's very true, Ryan. You see, your arms are doing a certain amount of resistance training, while your legs are doing a certain amount of endurance training. Anyone ever done cross-country skiing? Okay, or ever seen it?
No.
Okay. So cross-country skiers have to use it in several different ways, and we have a video clip. I think you're going to see it at the beginning of the next class period. You have to use your upper body to grab into the snow and pull, while your legs have to slide along. So your legs are constantly moving back and forth like this, like an elliptical machine, or maybe the Tony Stewart or Tony Scott, what was that old machine called? Gosh, can't remember the name of it. There was a machine, well, forget about it. Anyway, the point is this, that cross-country skiers have this very unique combination of resistance training that's necessary in order for them to be better, and endurance training that's necessary in order for them to be better athletes in their respective sport. Several of you are athletes in different sports. Some of you are power athletes. Some of you are endurance athletes. Each of you has to focus on one aspect of exercise. Cross-country skiing requires both aspects to be observed. Take, for example, this. When you're talking about the type of physique that a power athlete can develop, they generally are big, large muscle mass, right? Not necessarily slender, not necessarily endurance. Endurance athletes, on the other hand, generally are thin, somewhat fit, somewhat trim, but not necessarily big muscles. What type of an athlete would fit in between the two? Cross-country skier might, right?
Basketball.
Basketball might, right? You got to be tall, you have to have some muscle mass, but you also have to have some endurance at the same time. Pole vault is another good one. You have to have some type of speed, and generally you have to have a lot of upper body strength, but you also have to have the ability to have some lower body strength, right? All those things to be said, you have to be light in order to carry through the air well, right? Any other? Lacrosse, perhaps? Maybe? Swimming? What type of swimmer?
Like,
Michael Phelps.
yeah.
Really? Michael Phelps, short distance swimmer?
No.
Long
Like
distance,
a water
like
polo,
marathon
water polo
ones.
player?
Marathon swimmer, long distance swimmer, where it's actually beneficial to be buoyant, so having a little bit of blubber actually helps. They're the best type of athlete. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
No.
Okay, middle distance swimmer, middle distance runner. Ideal type of athletes. Now, I've used his name before in different classes. He's not too shy about it. In fact, he's a little bit mature about it and sometimes gets big-headed about it. But the best person that I can relate to you, who also tends to be a very good friend of mine, is Francis Owusu. Everyone knows who Francis is, right? Think about Francis's physique. Also think about the background that he comes from. He's got a father who did 400-meter dash in the Olympics. Francis, for the majority of his track career here at Oaks, did the 400-meter dash too. He now does the 100-meter dash more than anything. And he also plays basketball and football in the meantime. His physique, would you say he's massively huge? No.
Yeah.
Would you say he's massively slender? No, he's not. You wouldn't say he's massively huge. Anybody's massively huge compared to Kenny, because he's not anybody. Ideal combination of both strength and endurance. Okay? Muscles aren't massive, muscles aren't super tiny. It's a perfect balance of the two. Mother's Samoan. Troy Polamalu, Samoan. So he's got that build of having a lot of strength, but he's also got the build of having a lot of speed and endurance from the genetic, or from the DNA his father gifted to him. Okay? Unique person. When you think about the entire spectrum, you might think about Robbie McGee on one end, very large athlete. Yes, he is athletic. I know he doesn't look it. Okay? Francis maybe in the middle, and you might think of someone like, I don't know, Amy Anderson. Everyone know who Amy is? Amy Anderson on the other side of the spectrum. Slender athlete, does long distance tech running. Okay? You have to decide what kind of an athlete or what kind of a physique you want to have in order to do things like prevent diabetes, prevent heart disease, help you prevent against cancer. Okay? Things like that will be beneficial to you based off of the type of athlete that you become. VO2 max is the way that you would test your ability to be a better endurance athlete. And that's the world record that Bjorn Dahlia set, the VO2 max world record.
What is a VO2?
Let's talk about that in finish class today. Yes, there is a little dot over the V. That means uptake. The volume, V, of oxygen, O2, oxygen gas, uptaken by your body. So we measure to see how much, when it goes in, does your body actually use versus the carbon dioxide that your body breathes out while you're running or respiring.
So you want to use more of it, right?
You would want to use more oxygen, right?
He has more efficient lungs.
So he does have more efficient. So let's talk about where he sits and where you would sit on the scale of VO2 maxes. If I was to take any of you out, put you on a treadmill, and we'd have to get you to run for 2 to 3 minutes in order to test your VO2 max, 2 or 3 minutes at the very least. We'd actually probably put you on there for about 12 to 15 minutes on a treadmill, getting you to run as hard as you possibly could. But we need you to get to steady state exercise. We got to get you up there, and that takes about 2 or 3 minutes to get to steady state. If you pause for a second and think about, well, power athletes, they typically don't go for 2 to 3 minutes. They only go for about 10, 15 seconds at the very most when they're doing their sport, respectively. And endurance athletes, they don't go for 2 to 3 minutes. They usually go for 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes or more on end. A sport like a 400-meter run or a middle distance swimmer, generally about 2 to 3 minutes. 400-meter dash, 800-meter dash, 2 to 3 minutes. Okay? If we take any of you out, put you on a treadmill for 2 to 3 minutes and see how well does your body intake or uptake oxygen, we get numbers that would range between 30 and 45. And this measure is in, this would be milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. Okay? And we're going to end with this. You can write this chart down if you want, you don't have to, it's just nice to know. 30 to 45 milliliters per kilogram per minute. Now let's go down first. Let's talk about the worse than that. When I was finishing off college, just like a nurse does when they finish nurse school, you go around to different different units in a hospital, and you learn the different types of sectors that nutrition can really impact a person that needs increases in their nutritional status. Same thing is true for people that have issues with their heart. I worked in cardiac rehab for a while at a hospital in Seattle. Cardiac rehab is the unit that you would go to, maybe some of your grandparents have even gone to, when if you have a heart attack or if you have heart blocks. We bust open your chest, saw open that bone, pull it back and work on your heart, sew it back up again. Okay? A lot of work done on your chest and all that tearing of the skin. Makes it very hard for your body to respire because my lungs don't expand as well as they used to. These people that have a great amount of difficulty even just standing up out of a chair, they don't start and without heaving heavily, not heaving, but breathing heavily. Okay? And you might say to yourself, well, yeah, that's actually what happens when I get super overweight and I walk down the hall and I get sweaty. Yeah, it's the same thing. Those people don't have a very good ability to pull oxygen out of the air because their body is not very fit and hasn't been trained to do so. Makes some sense, right? If I look at those people, they're going to have a measure of VO2 max somewhere between, actually I should say 15 to 20. 15 to 20. And we actually graduate them when they get to about 25 or 30 and let them do exercise on their own again. Okay? If you have a VO2 max that's 10 or lower, that's when we start talking about getting things in order for you to maybe be moving on to the big upstairs in the sky. You really don't want a very low VO2 max. And in fact, you can't ignore it, especially if you're in a strength athlete. You can't completely ignore a VO2 max development. On the other side of the spectrum, we go up from here, start talking about maybe the better athletes in general public and then the better athletes in the world stage. So right above this, maybe we're talking about just cross-country runners here at Oaks and cross-country or distance runners in colleges. They might get a number somewhere between 50 and 70. Okay, 50 and 70. The highest I ever measured myself was 72. That was in college. We had to do the test so you could see what it was like when you're putting someone through that kind of stress. Name an endurance athlete. Obviously don't name Bjorn because I'm going to get to him, but name an endurance athlete.
Wait, you measured 72 personally, or you measured
When I did it
72?
No, I did 72.
Oh, wow.
Name endurance athlete that you guys know. He's recently been in the news. No longer as great an athlete as he used to be in some respects.
He's still amazing.
Lance Armstrong, 84. Okay, 84.
Is that with the steroids?
We'll talk about that. It probably was, yes, with the quote steroids. It's not steroids, but yes. High end of the spectrum, Bjorn Dollar, 96. Okay, 96. Look how great of a difference we're talking about. You, 30 to 45. Bjorn Dollar, 96.
Is that
It's a massive difference. No, this is not percent. This is 96 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. Think about a horse. Put a horse on there and do the same thing with the horse. Put a mask on them and limit the amount of breathing that the horse can do except for in and out of this mask. Okay? A horse, which has a massive amount of musculature, would get a much higher number, right?
No.
Yes, they would. Because their kilogram is much higher. Okay? But we wouldn't actually measure horses in milliliters per kilogram per minute. We would measure it in just milliliters a minute on a horse. Okay, so if we divide the kilograms and we look at the ratio, then yes, you are right, sorry. You are right. They would be roughly close to the same number as a human because each individual muscle fiber has the ability to respire about as well as a human muscle fiber does. Okay? Interesting, right? Okay? That is the path we're headed on. We're going to talk about different types of muscle contraction. We're going to talk about how to set up a fitness plan for yourself. We're also going to talk about the benefits and ways to prevent injury, like warm-up and cool-down, and why we do those things, which we all should be doing, especially like flexibility exercise too. I think you guys are set to go for chapel. Are you late?
Last meeting.